welcome to the Global Routing Operations Working Group session at IETF 112. We are here today in Bangkok, in Thailand. If you did not intend to be in Bangkok, seek help after the Grow session. Let's see. Is Christopher Morrow in the house? I'm not sure he is. All right. All IETF working group sessions are governed by the Note Well. Part of your obligation is to make sure you scan the QR code to indicate your presence in this session. And as part of the Note Well, we also ask you that you treat your fellow participants with due respect and allow for a debate, polite debate club to exist in this room. Let's see, we have some resources. Our agenda is available online or via the IETF Next app on your phone. There's a mailing list that I recommend joining, and you can interact with people in this room and remotely via the Zulip chat room. And with that, we need a minutes taker. Do we have a volunteer in the room who would be happy to take minutes during this meeting? Fantastic. Thank you. Then we go on to our agenda. The Grow meeting this week is split into 2 sessions. Each is 1 hour. There was one today and there's one on Thursday. Today we have the agenda is fairly packed on both days. Before we continue with our agenda, I want to ask our new area director on stage to introduce himself.
Yeah, so yeah, thank you, Joe, for the introduction. So yeah, I will be your new ED for the coming 2 years.
Come on the stage. We need a good look at our new area director. So for those who don't know, Warren Kumari, reality has finally caught up with him, and his gradings were, yeah, he did a really good job, but apparently Mohammed is going to do an even better job. So this is our new chief in Power.
Yeah, so yeah, good that you mentioned Warren. So really, Warren did a good job as, I would say, ops area director. So we already thank him in the ops working group for the service and many years of the service he provided for the community. So that is really appreciated. Yeah, so as a new ED, so it may be, I would say, strange to start with the shortening, but that's a discussion I wanted to have with, I would say, with the working group, because I don't know if you, time to time, if you look into the charter of this working group, it's really outdated. There is some refresh that needs to be done, some restructuring of the, I would say, the work and the scoping of what the Grow working group is I would say, targeting to achieve. So I already prepared, I would say, a draft text. So Job will share the link with you all. So the purpose is to be a little bit quicker on this. So iteration. I already started consulting with the routing area directors. We have from so John, Kitan, Gunther, and Jim. I already received from them some comments about the, I would say, the current proposed step. So we will reiterate here in the working group. Your feedback is really welcome. And we would like, at least for all the adopted documents, I would like to make sure that we have something which is really backed into our charter. So that means that the work you are doing won't be blocked later on the stage. So people that say that you are not chartered to do that, why are you asking us to publish this on our FC? So please get into, I would say, the text charter, review it, comment on it. If there are items that you think we don't need anymore to maintain them, for example, in the charter, we just need to remove them. I had a discussion this morning, for example, with Kitan. I'm saying here, he has a comment about the VPN stuff. He is asking why we have this in the, I would say, in the charter. Should we maintain it or not? So that's the kind of discussion we would like to have. So yeah, Joe, please share the, I would say, the link, and then we can have the discussion on the mailing list. Once we have, I would say, a stable version, I will go to the ASG to validate it and then take it from there. So that's that.
Thank you so much. So to summarize, Mohammed created a draft version of a charter proposal for this working group. I'll share that with the mailing list. In that same thread, people can make suggestions on the charter text, and then yeah, we'll pass it on. Next up, Paolo Lucenti. Thank you, sir. Let me see if I can share your slides. So there's been a few small changes in the tool. How do I stop sharing? Revoke slides. There we go. Thank you for your patience, Paolo.
Absolutely.
And now, wait for my next trick. You can use the clicker for like the first time in many years.
Exactly.
This should work.
Exactly. Let's see. It does work. Yeah, fantastic. All right. First draft on which I wanted to give an update is the so-called TLV draft, BMP version 4. Context around this draft, it's like that not all the messages are made equal. And so we are trying to, make it equal. And our chair, I always say this thing, and he always laughs to this thing. I love it. Anyway, so what are the changes since the last meeting? Is that there was one super small change to the text, but it was very important, specifying that V4 applies to all the messages. So it's not that we are touching only a couple of them, and then the others remain with a different version. It seemed quite intuitive. Of course, it's intuitive to the authors, but not to who is reading. So it was like just one sentence, but it was very important to specify it. The stateless parsing TLV, which, just to remember, it's something that we introduced as a TLV so that you don't have to go back to the PRAP and look at the look back at the PRAP and see what were the capabilities transported in there. So you just by reading a root monitoring message, you can, make it, parse it without, going to any external structure. So this TLV, suffered of a few different problems. I got feedback from Ahmed, from Swisscom, from Maxence, from INSA, and essentially like it drove to a simplification. Essentially, like let's use the capabilities from BGP. Let's not try to invent anything new. So now we have just the capability type, AFI-SAFI, and the capability value as is in BGP, as is in the BGP open, right? And the fact that you have the type, the AFI and the SAFI, essentially, I mean, it allows, for a collector to build a hash map in memory. So essentially, very easily, you can, knowing, what you are parsing, you can go in this hash map and then essentially like apply the capabilities and understand how to parse the message. And so this also allows not to create a registry in BMP, which is what we were doing before. We were reassigning new types for the capability that needed a stateless parsing, let's say, code point in there. So this was probably the most important and lengthy process that went in. we also processed the feedback from Med and Thomas, which for this draft, it was mostly editorial. There is one thing that is a question that I already raised in the last meeting in Dublin. So by speaking with Thomas, there is a disturbing situation in BMP where not always we have a timestamp. So you can imagine how you have a monitoring protocol and you don't have a timestamp. That is very, bad. So essentially, so this document was originally about TLVs, but in this document we are also bumping the version. So I was really wondering whether, just one sentence about timestamping would be, fitting this kind of document, like whether we could abuse this document since we are bumping the version and make, timestamp always mandatory, right? So this is an open question. If anybody has any thoughts or on this, I mean, I would really, really appreciate feedback. So yeah, this is about this draft. I don't know if anybody has anything. No, I continue. Yeah, I saw you playing with the device, so I knew you were going to.
I was just trying to find the right clicky thing to click on. John Scudder. Yeah, just in answer to your thing about the timestamp, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, once you have the patient open, if, there's, if the appendix needs to come out as well, do it then instead of, doing it in two documents. I mean, it just makes sense.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, Thomas, just one comment on the IANA code points. It would be great if we can get an allocation as quick as possible because we have now implementations going on. So it would be great at the beginning already on those implementation to have the IANA code points.
Absolutely. I point at the chair but the chair also did issue a request, I think, to the area directors or something like that about early allocation for code points. I'm defending you. You did it.
For EBIT, right?
No, for a TLB.
Everything is a three-letter acronym.
Right.
Yeah, that was a few weeks ago. Warren Kumari, I think, acknowledged this.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So I think this is rolling.
Okay, perfect.
Maxence Yunsi from INSA. So I think I had misunderstood what we discussed about when we talked offline about the stateless parsing TLS. Mm-hmm. I see that you kept the AFI-SAFI in the capability code. I think you could get rid of it entirely and just have the raw BGP capability in your TLV, because anyways, the capability, if it needs AFI or SAFI, it will contain it. And same for the capability code, you always have it.
Yeah, no, you're right. And I remember the conversation we had also about the fact that not every capability is per AFI-SAFI.
Exactly. There's some that are not per AFI-SAFI, and I think there's one of them that's per AFI, but not per SAFI.
Yeah.
I think BGP sec or something.
Right.
So, yeah.
So to clarify, the intent of having AFI and SAFI there was essentially like that you, for example, have a stateless one or a set of stateless parsing TLVs. You load all of them in the collector when you are parsing the message, and then depending on which AFI-SAFI NLRI you are parsing, then you know which capabilities you have to look for.
Okay,
but you are right. I mean, there are maybe situations where this may not hold. So maybe.
Yeah, I think also capabilities are on a per peering.
Yeah,
basis,
of course.
Don't even need to
but
okay.
You have also that information. You have it in the header.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. So, but you raised a good point on which I am thinking already, which is that not everything is per AFI and SAFI. So also this may break the hash map thing. So,
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we can talk.
sure. Thank you.
Hi, this is Prasad from Cisco.
Hi, Prasad.
Paolo, could you clarify what you mean by timestamping addition to the TLE? Because the base RFC already talks about timestamping, and it's optional. So
Yeah, so that's the exact issue. Like that, you have the timestamp field, but it's optional. So there are some times that you can just leave it blank.
yeah.
And instead, it would be very nice to have always a timestamp, right?
So you want to make it mandatory? Is that what
Yes,
you're
exactly.
proposing? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, we should talk offline about it
Sure.
because there are implications of making
Of course.
Hey, Ben Madison, Work Online. I was just reading the additional line that you inserted to clarify the version field. It's the first time I've read the document with that in mind, and I still find it kind of confusing. The introduction still reads as if we're changing version 3 as opposed to defining version 4. I think that the fix is easy, but I think there's actually further clarification to do on that. This is on GitHub somewhere, the source,
Yeah,
right?
it is.
I can, if you remind me of the URL at some stage, I'll do a pull request. I think I know how to fix it.
Please, thank you. Thank you so much. All right. I think the queue is over. So going to the EBIT draft. All right, so the EBIT draft, a very quick recap of the context. I mean, we may want to have some non-standard elements as part, or TLVs as part of, BMP. So we are defining a mechanism to support that. And we are essentially copy-pasting the mechanism that already works in IPFix. So what happened since the last version? Part of the feedback received was already processed, and we got the feedback from MED. So the part of the feedback that was processed was the editorial part. MED also proposed to absorb this document in the TLV1, and so historically, the only way we went for a split was just avoid that the EBIT, which is fairly simple, but could be also controversial, could stall the TLV part, right? And since there is some sort of urgency to move the TLV part on, like for example, Thomas was saying there are already implementations being done and things are already rolling. So it was a way to let them go at a different pace so that we can properly have the conversation on one side and, not the two things interfere. But I'm totally, as I was saying also on list to MED, I'm totally not opposed to reabsorb this into the TLV as long as we are totally clear on every part of the EBIT part, and then essentially we just merge it. So it's that is my only things that I would write to achieve. There has been also some conversation on lists about alternatives to EBIT, also with MED. Currently, I mean, we had this conversation sticking to the current plan, but if any other method should be used, we recognize that something else is clever than the EBIT, I mean, open to alternatives. So that's the most important part. And this is it about EBIT. I don't know if there is any comments, questions. No? Okay. About the REL draft, intuition of the REL draft is that we have a lot of nice stuff for the data synchronization, debugging, statistics, and session reporting in BMP, but we miss an event-driven kind of message. And so that is the intuition behind the REL, so that we can do things like alerting, reporting, or on-change analysis. What are the changes? There have been quite some changes or updates to the draft. I reworked the policy discard TLV because this is following a ban comment from last time. He was just saying something which is very true, that I'm lazy, and so I took a lazy approach to the policy discard. I left it like free format, and then I tried to say that we should structure. We put a comma between two strings, and everything is fine. And Ben slapped me on the wrist and said, "You have been too lazy." So now you have a 1 byte. You can say whether it's a free format string or it's structured. And if structured, I took a semi-lazy approach like now, right now, which is I have 2 consecutive null-terminated strings, one after the other, policy name and policy node. Okay. Of course, we can go further in the structuring, right? So I'm trying to structure things and I will stop when I will not receive comments like, okay, this is not well defined, not defined well enough. I worked out the log action TLV, which was unworked, was one of the 2 TLVs that was not worked out. I kept it simple. You have just a set of reasons and additional data. And I absorbed the crossed warning bound and crossed upper bound in the log action because they were kind of felt too specific to be, TLVs. You have something very generic, and then you have these 2 very specific, reasons. So I felt they belong to here. And then I worked out also the validation failed TLV. Again, I kept it simple. Now you have only some reason codes in there, and the reason codes are RPKI centric. But I'm also collecting feedback about different use cases than just RPKI. I don't know, for example, black holing. Open question. I have to process the feedback from Matt. Thank you, Matt, for providing feedback. The draft, I think there is a very good intuition at the basis, but it needs more examples. It needs to become to add text and be more practical. Final open question is probably comment number 1 that I got on this draft, and it was from Jeff, which is like what this draft, RHEL wants to do to be as a grown-up, right? So do we want also to enter feedback loop use cases? I don't know, for example, for flow spec, that was one intuition, or not. That would mean essentially making probably the BGP PDU, BGP update PDU optional. Collecting feedback on this as well here on the mailing list or one-to-one. Super happy to hear from you. And super quickly, the last slide, Prasad, sorry.
Hi, this is Prasad. Paulo, I was chatting with Thomas yesterday. He had one interesting perspective of this. So right now, many of the operators use ADJ ribbon pre and post kind of together, and then they do policy debugging, monitoring using that. An alternative to that could be ADJ ribbon pre plus tell. So, but right now, as it is structured, it is more for error kind of events. Just wanted to get your thoughts on, are you thinking like along the lines what Jeff asked as a grown-up? So where would we want this draft to go? Would it stay within the error kind of scenario?
Let's chat about it. I'm collecting feedback. Like if you have ideas, if you have use cases and whatever, let's talk about it. I mean, it's I am happy to follow a little bit what is the wishes of the working group, So
okay.
Please, let's talk later.
Yeah, and then there is a new draft which has come up for RPKI. We could look at that as
sure. Yeah. And so the last document, it's the RIBs filtered. Actually, there is zero to talk about. I mean, it's just to say, so the context is that we have the filter flag for lockrib, but we don't have it for ajribing and ajribout. It just makes sense to have it for consistency and also for use cases where you can have a filtered rib also in these situations, to have the F flag also there. There is really not a single change for the last 2 meetings, and maybe we should go for a working group adoption, looking at the chair.
All right, if the minute taker will note a to-do item that we do a working group call for adoption for BMP filtered.
And that was it. Thank you.
Any questions for Paolo? Thank you, Paolo. You're dismissed. And next up, we have no slides, but I would like to ask Jeff Haas to the stage.
Thanks for the time. Unfortunately, I think Mook will probably just fail to stay awake for this session, so apologies. I am not one of the authors on the BMP RibStats draft. I've motivated Mukul to actually drive this from Juniper's end of things, and he's been doing excellent work with his co-authors and trying to actually address what these stats are for. So, very small set of items that are worth highlighting. BMP has these stats. We have, courtesy of John, moved to the code points for the stats to first comes first served as an option. So the challenge becomes, how do we actually provide these stats in a way that are vendor neutral? How do we actually allow for somebody to avoid going out saying, I just want to schedule these 3 different stats, and they might mean the same thing as your stats. They might not. That doesn't make any of the operators actually happy. So there's a motivation for us to do some, at least minimal fairy dust sprinkling of process on this work in IETF to try to make sure that we do the best work for the operators. And I think we've actually gotten good success. There are many stats. I want to say in the order of about 25, 30 stats that have been added in the draft. And what we see in the implementation report, that's the current version, I think 7, is that there are 2 vendor reports. We have support for a good number of the stats across multiple vendors, which implies they'll be showing up in production. And I can certainly speak for my implementation that they will show up in production very soon. And we have actually had good demonstration in IETF that having review of these stats will actually lead to better definition of what they actually mean. So I think we have good success criteria. The point that's worth raising is, at some point, we need to say this is enough and cut an RFC on this thing so that we can actually ship it and yet continue the work. I think we're probably at that point. I don't pretend to speak fully for the authors, but certainly I'm in communication with several of them. So on behalf of the working group membership, rather than as an author, since I'm not one, I would like to encourage the working group to start a last call for this document, assuming the authors think that this stuff is fully in sync. Discuss what to do about the stats that have not actually been shipped to production yet. And this could include deferring it to the .next version of the document, and perhaps take up a regular cadence of this. Are there any comments about this as a possible strategy to shipping an RFC, making the operators a little bit happier, and seeing ideally the success continue?
Job Snyder's chair. You did mention that the registry allows for first come, first serve, but apparently all assignments were from the standards required section.
That was on purpose.
So this means we need to publish a standard.
Yep, we should. It has to publish at some point. So it's up to the chairs to decide when the last call actually happens, but I suspect we could probably do that.
Dear minute taker, would you like to jot down a to-do item that working group last call will be issued for BMP stats?
And please confirm with the authors that they think they're at the point of being ready. But I suspect the answer is probably soon.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Then I would like to invite Prasad Narasimha, if I'm pronouncing that in a way that is. All right, here's your clicker. And make sure that you stand on the cross. Left and right, yeah.
Hi, I'm Prasad from Cisco. I'll be talking about these two new drafts, which I've co-authored with Tariq and Dhananjay. I think Dhananjay is on the call remotely. The first one talks about keeping BMP collector in sync with the router in certain scenarios. There are situations when router may decide to stop exporting a certain rib view for a subset or for all the BGP peers which BMP is monitoring. This could happen, for example, when the rib view mode on the router is changed. Also, we are working with Camilo and Paolo and Thomas on the IETF BMP YANG draft. There are many filters. If those filters change for a given BMP collector, there could be situations where the router no longer is monitoring a certain view for the BMP collector, but the BMP collector thinks the router is sending data for it. And today we found there's no mechanism which exists in the BMP world to solve this. So our draft proposes a way to address this. So what we propose is to extend the per peer header to include a P bit and the peer header flag. Basically, when this bit is set, it would mean we want the BMP collector to purge it. So whenever a situation arises for the router, when any of the changes, sort of situations I mentioned arises, then it would send this message. This would be an extension to the routemon message, and we would sort of follow the MP and unreach NLRI with no withdrawn routes for that AFI-SAFI. This is exactly similar to how BGP would do it with the EOR marker. And then this can be used in combination with the O and L flags in the BMP header to indicate which particular rib view we want to purge. And the granularity of this would be at a BMP collector level, peer plus rib view plus AFI-SAFI. Yeah, that's it on this draft. Any questions, comments, feedback?
Luc Hendricks, NLNet Labs. If I'm not mistaken, in your next presentation, you will also introduce a possible new flag, right? And we also just heard about the F flag. And if my math is correct, we'll have one bit left out of the byte that we have for flags at the end of this session. So we might lose them all before dinner. Now they are there to be used, obviously, but they're not endless, clearly. Could we do this in another way? Could there be an alternative way to get this functionality? For example, and I'm not sure if I understood what you're trying to do exactly, maybe, but could we do this with a peer down notification, stick a TLV to it, which signals a purge, and it enables us to include a reason for the purge as well. Maybe we'll need to add some more info to be specific about address families, AFI-SAFI, right? But have you thought about a
thank you for the comment. You will see in the next set of slides, the TLV option is also proposed. So I agree with you. That's an alternative.
But that's for the common. That's for the other drafts, right?
But you're absolutely right. We could use the TLV approach for this as well. Okay. So
thank you.
That's an option. And then we did think about sort of overloading the peer down. The only reason we thought of using this was we felt it was not the right thing to do because peer down flushes everything for that peer, like all the routes. with this, you get the filter option of the AFI-SAFI and also the rib view. So that was one reason we went this route, but the TLV is definitely on the table. Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Jafaz, we're not OSPF, we're not ISIS, bits are free. Version 4 has just been announced as a thing that we should be doing. So I would strongly recommend actually going counter to everything you're saying in the sense of, could we squeeze this in somewhere else? We're going to make the implementation harder than we need to. This is the telemetry application. We don't have to squeeze ourselves, just make it bigger.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Ben, work online. I suppose this is kind of similar in spirit to what Jeff just said. Am I missing some reason why we can't just define a new message type to do this? That seems the most straightforward way. There's semantics that are completely separate to anything else in the protocol.
Yeah.
We're about to do a version bump, as Jeff says. I would just make this its own special thing and be done.
Yeah, new TLV is definitely possible. Yeah. Yeah, even new type is possible. Yeah. Thank you. Any more comments?
Job Snyder as chair. So I guess the summary is that multiple implementers should get together and converge on what is like the most efficient way to get this task done, and then circle back to the working group for working group adoption.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, one reason we just thought of the bit because it was very simple, and then there was no dependency on the TLV draft. So that was the motivation we started with it. But yeah. Yeah, the second draft kind of addresses this problem. So there is, we have these inbound and outbound route policies, which would modify a subset of the routes, incoming or outgoing, depending on the deployment. There could be deployments which modify all the incoming routes. Typically, we see that it's a smaller percentage than that. So this is relevant, especially when we have multiple reviews turned on. So let's say for this presentation, we would assume ADJ ribbon pre and ADJ ribbon post, which seems to be the most popular ones to turn on simultaneously. What happens today is the full rib table view for both of these modes get sent to the BMP collector. But in reality, only 90% of the, in reality, only 90% is being shared. So we don't really need to send both of them. So this impacts the number of BMP messages generated from the device. It impacts the CPU load and eventually the overall BMP convergence. And depending on the vendor implementation, it could also impact the BGP convergence because they're all sharing the same CPU. We propose a way to address this in our draft. So to avoid sending duplicate unmodified messages in the post policy, in the example I was taking, we introduced two alternate ways. I think to your point, one is the CBIT, which is similar to the previous idea where we are just borrowing, we are using a bit in the peer header. The other method would be the common update TLV, leveraging Paulo's draft, the TLV draft. So this would enable us to share messages across the in and out views. And in the best case scenario, when you could share across all the 4 modes, you would get 1/4 the number of messages. But if everything is getting modified, then there is no benefit of this draft. So this is the CBIT. Again, it can be used in conjunction with LN Obit. You can read the table offline, but depending on what bit is turned on, you would know it's ADJ ribbon or ADJ rib out, which is kind of common with pre and post. One limitation of using CBIT in the peer flag is the sharing can happen only between the in view or the out view. Like if somebody wants to do sharing across in and out, that's not possible. So that kind of gets addressed with the common update TLV. So here we define 4 bits in the common update TLV message, and we can address the problem of sharing across all the 4, across 2, across 3. Any combination is possible because it's a new message. So it gives us more flexibility, but at the same time, it introduces a dependency on the TLB draft. I had one open question for all of you, just to learn what percentage of updates, do your inbound or outbound policies modify, and then what kind of node roles. I would be happy to chat about that. That will give us some perspective on the different deployments, and maybe that could be added as a text to the draft as well. Yeah, any questions, comments? I would also like to point out that there is another route monitoring aggregated draft. This is complementing that. The route aggregated draft addresses the problem within a given review, and we are addressing the problem across reviews. So I think they would complement each other.
Hi, Prasad, Paolo from NTT. I had a couple of comments. Give me 1 second. Yes. On the stats part, I was thinking like, a little bit echoing what we were saying before, like flags are a premium. So probably having 4 flags can be an overkill. I was really thinking that, it's a periodical kind of message. So even if you have like 10,000 statistics instead, if you are not really saving much there. I can understand, like in the route monitoring, you want to be savvy and try not to transmit things twice. But if you make a line of a statistic for pre-policy, actually being pre-policy, actually being post-policy or whatever, even if you have the 4, I mean, for how many statistics you can have, I mean, you are not going to save much. And so you save the flags, and also you are consistent, I think, with the RIB stats, let's say, document, where essentially, like, it's very extensive. You may have things per RIB out, RIB in, pre-policy, post-policy, no problem, right?
So Paolo, this is for route monitoring messages. The sharing is for route mon messages.
No, for the stats message.
The second draft is also for route mon optimization. So if I go back, yeah, are you talking about this? This is for route mon. It's not for stats. It's so let me go back to the problem statement. So what I talk about here is when we send route mon messages for the different views. So let's take an example of ADJ ribbon pre and ADJ ribbon post.
Yeah, this is clear. But there was a point where you had the 4 flags.
Yeah, so there were 2 alternatives. One was using the cbit in the peer header for the route mon message. So let's say you're sharing between ADJ ribbon pre and post. You would turn on the cbit and say that this is for the inbound pre policy, and then that is how you would know. And then using the TLV method, you would sort of have this common update TLV, which is again for sending route mon. It's not for stats.
Okay. Then I totally sorry.
Yeah, but I agree with your point. If it were to be for stats, we don't have to be too worried, because it's like you said, it's periodic. It's not even at the scale of the route mon, so it doesn't make sense to do something like this for stats. But
fantastic.
I agree with you.
Fantastic. And I would also say, like, you have the 2 methods. I think it's very good to foster discussion on the working group, but you should pick just one method. I think having 2 alternatives, I mean, it's never a good idea. Yeah. Probably we are talking a lot around.
Yeah, I would love some feedback on what everybody thinks is a preferred method, and then
Sure.
Leslie's in the queue. Hit me.
Sorry, Leslie, you are up next. How does this work?
Okay, all right, maybe we'll come back to Leslie. So Jeff has, I have mixed feelings about the idea of the CBIT. So I'm sort of curious people's experience. How many people are running BMP to monitor reflectors versus their ABGP ASBRs? Because a significant portion of the benefit for running BMP comes from monitoring your edges rather than somewhere in the middle. And as a consequence, that means that your pre-policy and post-policy is going to be very low amounts of sharing. I think the second observation I'd want to make is if the motivation is trying to reduce sort of the noise in the BMP as a system, reduce the redundancy, at the risk of getting rid of timestamp granularity, which we've just been hitting in the chat about, rib out is a place where we could get a significant amount of benefit by putting in something that isn't per peer, for the rib outs. It is the case that almost everybody's implementation of BGP has some flavor of an update group, pick your favorite terminology for it. And BMP route monitoring, since it's not reflecting what's on the wire and is giving you some level of state compression, means that you could take benefit of that if you haven't advertised a BMP message for what's gone out and you've sent 5 messages out, it'd be nice to just simply say, if it's the same for everybody in the same update group and the PDU is exactly identical, serialize that once in BMP and serialize instead of a per peer header, serialize the fact that it's gone out to the set of peers in some fashion that makes sense in a future extension. That right there will take care of not the atrocious weight that the BMP rip-out feature is imposed upon all of us that we all loathe and hate, at least in devland. I don't know how the operators actually feel about it, but it will absolutely reduce the amount of information that the telemetry sensors have to consume for it.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff. Yeah, that was one of the reasons I wanted to get some feedback to see how it's deployed, I think, to the point you made. And the second point you made about the update groups, I think that is addressed by the route monitoring aggregated draft. And I've been talking to the authors of that draft as well. And I'm meeting with them day after tomorrow. So we believe it's complementing, and then there are some additions we can make to that draft along the lines which Jeff was also alluding to. Yeah.
Ben, you're the last one in queue.
Ben, welcome online. Just a data point to Jeff's question. All of that's certainly true for us. I think that I can't actually think of a case in which a local change to a policy that touches a route in some way would result in there being duplication between pre and post policy. At least for AdRibbon, maybe less so for AdRibout, but I think that there's almost no scope for duplication there. The other thing that I would just point out, and this might be very, very different for other operators, but for us, the kind of configuration change that would result in the properties of a given prefix that's already in the routing table changing without there being some churn in the protocol itself are very, very few and far between, and they're quite carefully managed and quite carefully tested. I wouldn't be worried about the additional load created on the collection infrastructure or on the router during those kind of changes, because we expect fairly large and time-consuming convergence events to happen. These things are scheduled quite carefully there. It's not the kind of thing that's happening with any sort of degree of frequency at all. We're talking about, single digits per month, if that.
Okay, thank you. I'll talk to you more about this. Thank you. All right, thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, then I'm kicking you out of the queue. Maxine, can I ask you to come to the stage? Yep.
Hi again. So still Maxence Chancy from INSA Lyon. I'm here to present the update on BMP local lockrib peer address. This draft basically, yeah, just stay on this one. This draft basically tries to address the fact that in the local RIP route monitoring messages, we don't have the peer address. So, for example, when you have @pass ID, you cannot identify the pass because the @pass ID is on a per peering scope. Here's the diff. So we got some review from Met. So thank you, Matt, for the review. It was very extensive and very useful. I've already made the changes to the draft, mostly editorial changes. And the review opened some discussions about the ERAC's peer address TLV. So I'm here to ask the question to the working group and see what we should do. So yeah, ERAC's peer address TLV. The TLV is the one that carries the peer address for the route you are seeing in a route monitoring message in the local RIP, so peer address, peer type 3. That's how it looks. And currently we have an address type, which is either self-originated, IPv4 address, global link address, and IPv6 local with an interface ID or an interface name. So that's the current state of it. Matt proposed that we use IPv6 mapping for IPv6 addresses. Yeah, why not? I'll put more details on them later, but yeah, okay. We have also the use of zone ID to cover both the interface ID and interface name, and the removal of the address type field, which may apply. Okay, so the first one is IPv6 map to IPv4 addresses. It's okay, so it's the opposite. IPv4 addresses mapped to IPv6. So the pros is that we have one less IP type. If we do that, the address type can just keep IPv4, and we know that in IPv6 either an IPv6 classic address or an IPv4 mapped. The cons. So this is my opinion. Maybe I'm missing some of them. Maybe I'm not too familiar with how it works. But to me, there's also the legacy code. So some collectors that maybe do not support IPv6 addresses or IPv6 mapped. I don't know. Maybe they do not support it, and that would mess up a bit. I'm not sure. There's also the fact that we have to. There's a bit more work to do for the exporter and the collector when we have the mapping. So we need to map the IPv4 to IPv6, then unmap it to match it in the collector. And the fact that it's a bit more bytes for the same information. So we have the few bytes of prefix that we add to the IPv4 address. So I don't know if we have some comments on that maybe at the end. The second one is replacing the interface name and ID subtypes by the zone ID. This one is, the pros is that we basically have one thing covering both of them. So it reduces, again, the number of items we have in this address type field. And it's also already standardized. The cons that I see is that if we encode everything as an IPv6, the IP as a string, then it becomes bigger in size again. And the question is the zone ID, does the zone ID allow us to correlate with IPv6? Like, is this exported in IPv6? That I don't know. I think it depends on what the zone ID is, and that I'm not sure. So yeah. And the last one is removing the address type altogether. So if we apply both changes that we had that Matt proposed, then we only have one type of address, which is IPv6, and we can just remove it. And if we keep, for example, just IPv4 and IPv6, we can just base ourselves off the length of the value. I'm not really a fan of this because it's less explicit. We have to do a bit of logic. That's just personal taste. But the other thing is that it's less future-proof. So I'm not sure which kind of addresses we could put in there. But if for any reason we could, we would need it. We would have it, and it's not a big thing for me. Yeah. Also, it's only 1 byte, so it's not that much, even though it's a new INR registry. So yeah, I'm not sure what the working group thinks of this. I would like some comments, maybe some reviews again about this. And yeah, that's it.
Any questions or comments?
No?
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
All right, dear people, this brings us 5 minutes ahead of schedule to the end of our meeting for today. We will reconvene this session on Thursday, where we'll continue talking about BMP, BGP operational security, and various other topics. So thank you for attending, and see you in 3 days.